this important message about human trafficking in Nova Scotia and our faith-based response to what's going on in our province. I've been at Open Doors Centre I'm in my 12th year now, and it's been an exciting journey. Some of you may be familiar with Open Doors Centre. It wasn't our original name, and we started in 1987. We were called the Halifax Metro Crisis Pregnancy Centre. So we've been helping vulnerable youth for over 30 years with critical services, starting with the pregnancy services. Whenever a youth comes to us, it doesn't cost them any money. It's free for them to come as often as they need to get the support that they're looking for. And what our goal is, from a faith-based perspective, which I can talk about more later, we want to help youth make healthy life choices that will give them options and opportunities in their lives. We first started focusing on helping youth with unplanned pregnancies. And then in about 2016, we started helping youth who were being sexually exploited. And one of our goals is that we can just be a safe place for a young person to come and talk about something critical that's going on in their lives. Often when they come to us, they feel like they don't have anybody else they could talk to. And so we want to be that safe, Christ-like space. Clients come to us whether they have an unplanned pregnancy or if they're being exploited. They mostly contact us by text. So we have a cell phone, they can reach us. Sometimes they'll email in, and then occasionally we will get some phone calls as well for any kind of an appointment. And we try to see them almost immediately when they reach out, especially as sexually exploited youth. We try to see them almost the same day if we can. So we really have two big ministries going on at Open Doors Centre. As I mentioned, we help youth who have unplanned pregnancies. All of us here have a lot of life experience, and so we know that when a woman has a pregnancy test and it's positive, that is a moment she will remember for the rest of her life, regardless of the outcome of her pregnancy. And so when we look at those pregnancy test results with our clients, it is a very special moment that we get to have with them. It's a critical time for them to receive loving care and support. And what we do is we offer love to them just like we believe Jesus would. So we support them through a decision-making process, and we help them think through all of their options, and we really want them to make an informed decision about what they're going to do with their pregnancy, because once that pregnancy test is positive, there's no turning back. An important decision needs to be made. And we want to help them to make a decision based on their values, who they are, not the pressure that life circumstances are putting on them. Most of you probably saw the little 5-year-old that was with me today. So prior to having this little 5-year-old in my life, I'd already had 4 children. My oldest children are ages 20 and to 29. And about 5 years ago, about 6 years ago, I had a young 16-year-old come in for a pregnancy test, and that pregnancy test was positive. The father of the child was also 16 years old, and they were at a critical time in their lives. As a result of coming into Open Doors, she did choose to carry to term, but it wasn't too long after she'd had her little boy that she realized she needed more help and support than she had thought when she was just pregnant. Parenting was much more overwhelming for her. And so she came to live with us for a while. She came to live with us for a few months with little Kai, and then she moved out, and Kai stayed with us very, very unexpectedly. And so now I am raising this little guy with my husband, and our other children are moved out and married. And so every day he's a reminder of this important work that we do, helping women make a decision around an unplanned pregnancy. If women are coming in to talk to us about this pregnancy decision, it means they have complicated life circumstances going on that make them feel very conflicted about it. So no matter what a woman decides to do with her pregnancy, we support her. We do miscarriage support. If a miscarriage happens, we do parenting support, and we will also do post-abortion support, because we want women to be able to hear about the love of Christ no matter what decision that they make with their pregnancy. We often have moms and babies come to the center, And we have a boutique, and I'm very thankful to see all the donations that have come here today for our boutique, because it's an amazing thing to be able to provide material support for these new moms who need help. And in that special boutique, we also have supplies for exploited women. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but our exploited women often have children. And so they actually both often need both divisions of the center as they're coming in for pregnancy support, pregnancy loss support, or also sexual exploitation support. So it's just such a privilege to work with anybody who comes through the door, whatever their needs are. So I just mentioned our Helping Exploited Youth Division, which is the main reason we are here to talk today. And I'm going to use the word sexually exploited and trafficked interchangeably. They mean the same thing. And so you'll hear me using both words this afternoon as we describe youth who are in the sex industry in Canada. So the Maritimes has a strongly established human trafficking network. All across Canada, there's different places where traffickers will take youth in order to exploit them. And in both federal and provincial policing, it's broadly understood that Nova Scotia is the recruitment hub for sex trafficking Canadian youth. Canadian youth are exploited right here in our province, and they're exploited in rural locations, they're exploited in towns, and they're exploited, of course, in our city of Halifax. So there's no one area that doesn't see sex trafficking. Our latest statistics is that Lower Sackville in HRM has the highest rates of trafficking. That's probably because there's the greatest population of youth in Lower Sackville of anywhere in Nova Scotia. So we have Canadian laws around sex work, and they are fairly recent Canadian laws in the last 10 years. But our laws as of 10 years ago is that youth cannot consent to sex work if they're under 18. So it's illegal. If they're under 18, it's an easy answer for any young person to say, you can't do it, it's not legal. Our legislation, what it does is it is legal to sell sex. So somebody who is over 18 years old is not breaking the law if they choose to sell sex. What is illegal is to buy sex. So you're not allowed to buy sex, and you're not allowed to be under 18 selling sex, and you're not allowed to profit off of somebody who is selling sex. So that means traffickers are doing something illegal. Men who are buying sex are doing something illegal. But young people or women who would say they are choosing to sell sex, they are not doing something illegal. And the purpose behind our laws is to try to protect women and children and keep them safer. So that if either children or women want to come forward to the police and say, I need help, they are free to do so because they're not going to be criminally charged. Does that make sense? So that's our Canadian laws. Sadly, we don't have a lot of criminal convictions of buyers or traffickers. They often get off. It's been a very hard thing to prove in our courts. But that's just the basic foundation, just so you understand if you're ever talking to a young person that might need some of the truth to help them move forward. So in Nova Scotia, the average age of recruitment when a trafficker would try to trap a young person into the sex industry, the average age of recruitment is 13 years old. So I'm sure that your reaction to that was the same as mine. That is so young. That is just a child. I was shocked when I heard something that was so evil was happening right in our cities and in our communities. And most of us, if you're anything like myself, when I found out, I had no idea, because it's a very invisible problem that's happening in our society. When we think of human trafficking, when we think about sexual exploitation, we usually think it's something that's happening over there, overseas, in Eastern Europe or in Asia, but certainly not here in our communities. But the truth of the matter is that all of the cases of trafficking that have appeared in our courts in Canada, over 90% of the trafficking that have landed in our courts have been happening domestically, not outside of our borders. This means that our youth are both being recruited and exploited within Canadian borders, and it makes sex trafficking a Canadian problem and a Nova Scotia problem. So there's 4 ways that our youth are lured into trafficking. The first stage of trafficking is called recruitment, where they're lured into this terrible situation. One of the most common ways is that an older man or an older teenager poses as a boyfriend and lures a girl in to a false relationship, and then he gains her trust. And he can slowly start the path to exploit her. Somebody can be recruited, groomed, and then exploited. It could take a month, or it could take 2 or 3 years. It really just depends on the people involved. Another way that youth are recruited into the sex industry is actually when an older woman poses as a friend or a mentor or a coach to a young person and eventually lures them into the industry. In our schools, the older youth are convincing younger youth who are vulnerable that this lifestyle is fun, that they could make a lot of money. And so youth are actually exploiting each other right in our school system. Usually the older teen is already under the control of a trafficker. They're not usually doing it independently. We've also had a sad situation in Nova Scotia with criminal cases where parents are trafficking their children. And also sometimes parents will traffic their children's friends, boyfriends or girlfriends. For many of us, it's just sickening. It's so hard to believe that this could happen in our community. But it's important for us to know so that our eyes are open and we can be watching and not deceived. So if we can bring this out into the open and we can know the truth, then we can do something about this sad truth. As I'm sure most of you could imagine, the internet is also a tool for recruitment. There's people who are paid to be online all day long to establish relationships with youth, have conversations with youth, and then eventually meet up with them for the purpose of trafficking them. It's very scary to think that our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, or even the youth in our church, the youth going to the schools right down the street, could get trapped into this evil industry. And our youth do need our prayers and our help right now. It's very, very important. So the first thing that happens to a youth who's being drawn into the sex industry is they're just simply recruited. Somebody befriends them. And as you can tell from my examples, it's not just one type of person. It's not just a big black guy with gold chains and the stereotypes that we have in the movies. It can be anybody, and we need to just be aware of what to watch for. So after a youth is recruited, the next step for them is to become isolated. The trafficker will isolate them. The trafficker is trying to convince the youth at this stage that they need them. Often what they'll do is they'll take them away for a weekend or a week, and they might take them somewhere foreign. Like Moncton is very, very common for traffickers to take youth to Moncton for the weekend, to take them to the strip clubs there. Montreal, Toronto, kind of depending on the situation. But what the trafficker wants to convince the youth is that they need them. The youth feel disoriented and uncomfortable, especially if they're younger in unfamiliar surroundings. They'll take their phone and their IDs. They're utterly dependent on them. So after a number of situations where the trafficker can isolate the youth and create a strong dependency on them, the third stage of trafficking and the final stage is simply the control and exploitation stage. At this point, when a youth is fully under the control of the trafficker, they're also fully engaged in the sex industry. So there's methods that the trafficker will use to keep control over them. Probably the most treacherous one that I've heard of is that instead of the trafficker threatening to hurt the youth, maybe to harm them physically, what they'll actually do is they'll threaten to expose their activities to their parents or to their friends. And the deep sense of shame over what's going on in their lives keeps the youth silent because they don't want the picture sent and they don't want anybody really knowing what's going on in their lives. So it's a very deceptive situation. Organized crime is typically happening at this stage. In our Canadian laws, we define organized crime as when two or more people are involved in criminal activity. That's organized crime. And so if the trafficker is involved in selling the youth for sex, and he has one or two other people watching over this youth, making sure they don't do anything they're not supposed to do, that means the youth is actually underneath an organized crime group. So we have large gangs that traffic youth in Nova Scotia, and sometimes it's just one, two, or three people that are trafficking a young person. In this stage of exploitation, it is the most difficult stage for our youth to leave. They are severely traumatized once they're in the sex industry, of course, and they often feel like they've just lost themselves. They don't know who they are anymore. They often haven't even finished high school yet. They don't have any ID, and they don't feel like there's any way out. You can imagine. Teenagers are barely figuring out who they are in their teen years already. So there's really only 4 ways for somebody to escape the sex industry under a trafficker at this point. They could risk escape. They could risk running away. They could be rescued. They could be found by the police or somebody who's caring. They might be killed, or they might just be thrown away. That's our reality in Canada. Those are 4 outcomes for the youth. The only other way that I've ever seen is sometimes they can buy their way out. The trafficker will give them a price tag that they have to earn in order to get out from underneath his control. And it's usually around $20,000 that they have to earn to get out. So there's 2 reasons why this is happening in Nova Scotia, in Canada, and around the world. First is just simply supply and demand. People will pay to have sex with youth, so traffickers are supplying the youth. That's the raw truth of our society right now. The second reason that trafficking is so prevalent is because it's extremely lucrative. A trafficker can make $250,000 per youth per year. So a trafficker can sell a young person multiple times, but they can only sell a gun or drugs once. So they can see it as a way to get ahead financially. From our perspective as Christians, there's 2 underlying factors that are fueling this as well. It's not just about the money and people wanting to purchase sex. We also have an insidious evil in our society right now called pornography. And pornography is at people's fingertips. They're watching sex all the time. And seeing these images desensitizes people, and it makes these activities seem normal or even desirable, and people start to live out their porn-induced desires. The second thing that's happening in our society is there's just a lack of respect for human dignity. Human dignity is the principle that every person has value. That's what our scriptures teach us. From conception until natural death, every person has value. And so traffickers have lost that sense of human dignity for both themselves and the people that they're using and controlling. And we just believe as Christians that everybody deserves to have a healthy, whole life and to be treated with dignity and respect. So I'm going to shift gears now because I know this was a lot of hard, heavy information to hear about what's happening and what's happening to our youth right now. And I don't want your takeaway from this presentation to be a sense of despair or fear. What I want you to take away is that God is moving. He's using places like Open Door. There's another faith-based ministry called Trey that some of you may be aware of here in Nova Scotia. God is not indifferent to the suffering of our youth, and he is calling us to action. Many of you know the story of Moses and how God heard the cries of his people in Egypt and chose Moses to deliver them, to deliver his children out of slavery. Well, human trafficking is modern-day slavery, and God does not turn a blind eye to it. Human trafficking and everybody caught inside it, whether it's traffickers or youth being trafficked, they are all God's lost children. And God has heard the cries of those who are hurting and oppressed. And he is calling us, he is empowering us, his followers, in the same way he empowered Moses to set the captives free. I know when I started this in 2016, I had no sweet clue what I was doing. I just had 3 teenage girls, and I was just like, there has to be a faith-based response to this. And so we've just been learning over the years as God empowers and equips us to do this work. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the Helping Exploited Youth Ministry is doing through Open Door, how God is answering through Open Door to take this hidden evil in the Maritimes and to turn it around. So we have 2 main ways we attack this problem right now. The first is prevention, and the second is protection. So we know that Halifax is a recruitment hub. So prevention is essential because right now teens are easy targets because they just don't understand what they're being recruited into. And they don't know what to look for. They don't realize that this guy who seems really cool and he's older, what his intentions really are unless they know what to watch for. Some youth are very, very vulnerable and they need help. What we understand about who typically gets recruited, like I said, on average of age 13, youth who are Indigenous have the highest rates of trafficking. Also, youth who are in foster homes or who are in group homes, of course, would be much more vulnerable because they don't necessarily have the caring parents paying attention to their day-to-day lives. But sadly, a youth can be trafficked who's living at home and who's going to school, who has both parents at home. Trafficked youth come from all socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnicities. The truth is that in the sex industry, white girls are worth the most, so they are targeted constantly. So what we have done at the center is we've created really amazing presentations for the schools so we can be in there talking to you so they understand what's going on around them. They can tell us or a caring adult or maybe their friends can alert somebody because we want to reduce the number of youth who are being groomed and trafficked from Nova Scotia. We want a situation where our youth are no longer easy targets. So prevention is a big piece, and I have a quick story about prevention. In one of our school presentations, there was a young girl, and I'll call her Melissa. And after we spoke at the school, she came up to us and she confided that she'd been trafficked. Somebody had pulled her into a van and driven away, and she'd been gone for a while, and she hadn't even told anybody yet. We were the first one she told because she saw our presentation. And so we felt like it was such a privilege to be that safe place where youth could disclose such an important secret and they could get help. So then there's also the protection strategy, and we do lots of work around this. When a trafficked youth comes to Open Door, we talk with them about what they're going through in a safe, judgment-free space. Of course, we would love it if we met them just when they're being recruited and they realize there's something wrong going on, because then we can help them avoid getting trapped in the sex industry. But we mostly see women who have been in the sex industry for a while. We sometimes even see women who started when they were youth and are adults now still in the sex industry. So we do cross the line between youth who are sexually exploited and women who would call themselves sex workers. But we believe that no woman would ever willingly choose that as an occupation if they had another alternative. And so that's our perspective, is it's not a choice to do that. So when we're working with them, it might mean that we're connecting them with other community resources. We might be saying they can go and get faith-based rehabilitation for up to 3 years. And we also have our own counseling, trauma counseling that we do with them right in Open Door. We have the ability to offer them a safe housing option if they're not quite ready to go into rehabilitation. We work with Souls Harbor to get them into safe housing. Often women call us right from a hotel, "Can you come pick me up?" Or we've even had police drop youth off who just need help. Before COVID and a bit during COVID, we had our own safe housing, but that ended during COVID and we haven't been able to restart it. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about a girl, and I'm going to name her Tasha. And this is one of the women I had the personal privilege of working with. She was tricked by a man that she thought loved her. She was about 15 years old, and this guy was her world, and she loved him with all her heart. He was her first boyfriend. So he invited her one day to just take a trip to Toronto with him. He wanted to go have some fun in Toronto. And there she realized that she wasn't the only one. He had many girls in his stable. That's what they refer to it to as a stable. So after about a year, she never did get to come back home. She ended up staying in Toronto. He kept her there. So she was sold for sex for about a year. And he was keeping her locked in a house in Toronto. And he was hurting her, and she was starting to lose hope for her life, not really knowing where life was going to go for her. And then one day, I will always remember her telling me this story, she saw an opportunity to escape. So here she is in downtown Toronto. She ran out the front door when he forgot to lock it, and she ran into 4 busy lanes of traffic, stood right in the middle of them, waiting for a car to stop and help her. That's how desperate she was. She was taken to a police station. She didn't even have shoes on. She had just bare feet and her clothes. And the police returned her home to Nova Scotia. The next twist to this story is that when she returned home, she realized that she was pregnant with the trafficker's child. So she had another tough decision to make. First, the tough decision to run and escape, and then the decision what to do with this baby. She chose life for this baby, and she knew it would come at a great cost. And she is working very hard to raise this little one and to be a good mom every day. She has to learn how to be a good mom every day. But she will forever have a tie to this man who she loved and who's the father of her child. Her life is complicated. Sometimes she feels like she still has feelings for him. She still remembers loving him. Even though he used and abused her so badly, she has a little bit of what's called Stockholm Syndrome, where you love your captor. And it's a real journey for her to work her way out of that. The healing journey for trafficked youth is not black and white, and it's not straightforward, and it's a very long journey. There's lots of twists and turns, and it takes loving grace and support to walk with these young people. What was very interesting about this particular youth is she heard us through hearing a presentation in a church one Sunday morning. I was speaking in a church in downtown Halifax, and she was sitting in one of the chairs with a man who had actually been purchasing her for sex recently. This man claimed he was a Christian and brought her to church. And when they both heard my presentation, they contacted the center, and together they both came in for help. I was a little bit overwhelmed when I found out how that all happened, but our God is a big God. He has big plans, and if we can just be available to him, it's amazing what he can do and how he can heal broken hearts. One of the things I learned with working with Tasha is how much trust is a big deal for youth who have been trafficked, because they've just been lied to and manipulated for so long. When she first started coming to me, she could only talk for 20 minutes, and then she was done. She just had to go. 20 minutes maxed her out. And over the next couple of years, I saw the time, and she said, I can't come in if I have to talk for more than 20 minutes. Okay, that's all right. Let's just do 20 minutes. By the time a couple years later we were meeting, she was able to even go past an hour sometimes to just share a little bit more of her heart when she came in. And so it's really about putting trafficked youth in the driver's seat. What do they need, and how can we meet those needs? When we can do that, they can get their life back one day at a time, one step at a time. We just love her as she needs it. Eventually, Tasha was with us long enough that she was able to get her first job through Open Door. For a while, we had a thrift store where we were selling mom and baby clothes, and she got her first job outside the sex industry in that store. And she gained so much confidence and so much hope for her future, because now she had a real resume with real work experience that she can build the rest of her life on, and her daughter. And she's now flourishing in her life with her daughter, and we just celebrate that Tasha came to us so many years ago, and she's been able to heal. So I've told you a couple of stories, and I've told you some of the cold, hard facts about what happens in trafficking, so that you can recognize potentially what might be going on. Maybe you're recognizing isolation. Maybe you're just recognizing recruitment, or maybe you're recognizing a youth that seems to be fully under the control of somebody. The challenge is, with that little handout that I gave you, that you could help recognize the signs of somebody who's being trafficked. The challenge is that all of our underage youth are teenagers. So all of us here have been around these things called teenagers, who have all kinds of signs going on in their lives. And so one individual sign that you have in that list doesn't necessarily mean that a youth is being trafficked, but it's more like if you see a combination of the signs, and especially if you're noticing a distinct change in behavior, a sudden distinct change in behavior, that's something to pay attention to. Drastic changes in how a person acts or talks or dresses or presents themselves, or if they suddenly have a mysterious new phone that nobody else gets to see, there's just these signs that can alert us something might be wrong and it's worth a deeper conversation. So we have the signs that we can watch for, and you can take, like we were saying, you can take those handouts to your church, and we're happy to do more church presentations as well. We also do youth group presentations. So if somebody sees a sign that a youth might be being trafficked, it's worth initiating a conversation. Maybe not necessarily the first conversation of, do you have a trafficker? That might be overwhelming for a young person who's been told to keep it a secret. But just to reach out to them, to love them, to listen to them, to be a caring adult. The statistics are, if a youth has one caring adult in their life, they will likely not step into this world of harm. But they just need one. Another way that we can help youth is just to get involved in some way in the local youth group in our churches. There's teenagers right there, and you just never know. Prayer is so important. You know, I pray with our staff team regularly for our clients and for each other, and we need to pray for this ministry and for the Trey ministry that are helping trafficked youth. Pray that these youth don't fall into this trap, and if they do, that they have the means to get out of it. Another thing that you can do to make a difference in this area is to share with somebody what you've learned today, so that other people can be aware of what's going on in Nova Scotia. So I'm so thankful that so many Baptist churches here in Nova Scotia partner with Open Door. They partner with Open Door financially. They partner in prayer. They read our articles in the Tidings magazines. And we are not government funded. We are only funded by Christians and by churches. And we get a teeny tiny Nova Scotia summer student grant. So we are fully dependent on partnering with churches so that we can be effective in this work that we're doing. So I just want to say thank you today. Thank you for your generous donations that are in the other room, and thank you for coming and listening to what's happening in Nova Scotia, and thank you for partnering with us in prayer and finances on an ongoing basis. It changes lives, and we're so appreciative. So that's all I had to say today. I believe we had time for questions. Yeah.